We now have legal access to just 7% of the country and 3% of its rivers. The rest of that land is owned by less than 1% of the population. Entering someone's land without permission is known as trespass.
Am I allowed here? Do I belong here? Is this mine to cherish? Is this mine to respect?
But will be made a criminal offence by the new Police, Crimes, Courts and Sentencing Bill. This Act, being rushed through Parliament in the wake of protests against inaction on the climate emergency, systemic police racism and inequality, gives the police sweeping new powers to break up any demonstration deemed annoying. Pollution in our areas and rivers is at dangerous levels, and projects like the new rail line HS2 are tearing up our countryside.
I think we've got maybe the least trees per person in Europe, or one of the countries with the least trees per person in the world. So we can't afford to be cutting down our ancient woodlands.
This film will explore the loss of our connection to the land, the new legislation which threatens our rights to roam freely across it, and our right to protest against its destruction.
At least 2 of these protests, news footage that is available online that many of you have probably seen shows that these dispersal orders were given after the police had begun physically and violently attacking protesters on site.
Lies about broken railways, they lies about broken.
Police are meant to protect us, they do not. I am scared of the police when I'm walking around at night. I am scared of the police when I'm walking around in the day.
The government has shown that it does not give a shit about addressing any of these issues. But not only that, they will now limit our rights to protest about these things.
So who's your boss? Okay, these guys don't talk, right?
No,
okay.
It's part of our biological heritage to be outside. I think, in the last century, loads more people have been moving towards urbanised places, whereas we used to kind of live in a much more rural and open setting. I think connection to nature when we live in urban places is more important than it has ever been. There's lots of people who just feel hemmed in by the city, hemmed in by their jobs. They feel that there just isn't that access to nature. The 9 to 5 and the hustle and bustle of the city isn't satisfying them in the way that kind of we were promised. Access to green space and nature, there have been loads and loads of studies on the mental and physical health benefits. So whether it's to do with blood pressure or just taking that space to go for a walk. We're not supposed to live in such close proximity to so many other people, and I think just that sense of space around you is completely essential if we're to live kind of satisfying and fulfilled lives. Can you reach somewhere within 5 minutes of your house, or do you have to take a bus? Is it going to cost you money to get somewhere that's going to physically and mentally benefit you? So I think that is a massive issue. Even something as simple as having trees on your road, that does actually make a massive difference to how you feel when you look outside your window. It makes a massive difference to air quality. It makes a massive difference to, it's a natural temperature regulator. In the summer it's cooler and in the winter it can be warmer. The benefits are so far reaching.
In St Paul's, an inner city area of Bristol, a group of campaigners have occupied a row of maple trees right next to the M32 motorway to prevent them being felled by developers. The protesters claim that the strip of land on which the trees sit actually belongs to the council and therefore the public. They're arguing that the trees should be kept, as childhood asthma rates in the area have increased to 47% because of the high levels of air pollution.
Generally, the permission to take out a tree, that decision is made by part of the planning department of the council. They get the application, they make the decision. Quite often that's made by just one person. Big, healthy, mature trees in the city seem to be going left, right and centre.
No individual person in this area that we have spoken to wants these trees to go. They all want them to remain. There's a whole issue to do with health, I've been standing on this road now, I've got a sore throat.
Yeah.
I'm feeling really, really not very well, and it's largely to do with the air quality that's here.
When these guys first came in really early morning and tried to cut the trees down, we did stop them, and we thought we'd kind of won for a while, but then they snuck in again on New Year's Eve and took down 2 of the 3 trees.
Somebody came out, one of the local residents, and was over this other side of the fence to stop them doing it.
Yeah.
And a guy brandished a bit of a spanner at them and was angry.
Right.
And then the police were called, and so the police turned up before they could take the third one down, to our understanding, which makes you feel like they're breaking the law, doesn't it?
Written to the council, showing all the documentation that we have, proving that the trees, the little sliver of trees, belongs to the public, and he's actually trespassing.
One thing I know for sure is that this developer will be making an absolute fortune, which is why he doesn't give a toss about the locals. He doesn't give a toss about the fact that we're facing a climate emergency. He's got pound signs in his eyes, that's all that he cares about. And we people are just saying, actually, there's so much more to life than money. You can't eat money.
The Purple Patch Community Farm runs a scheme for children to plant a fruit tree, which they'll be able to nurture for the rest of their lives.
And then you're going to put your name on it and get a photo. If you have babies, one day you might be able to come back and pick the apples with them. They might even have babies, and there still might be apples on this tree that you plant, if we're lucky. Being given the opportunity to plant a tree when you're a child makes a big difference.
There's been a lot of talk about tree planting, I feel, in the last couple of years, and how that we can reduce our carbon output through planting trees. And while this is all well and good, I think it's a highly oversimplified message. If you take, for example, a veteran or an ancient oak tree, something that stood for like 800 years, well, yes, that's taking out a certain amount of carbon from the environment, but it's doing so much more than that. So you've got a complete ecosystem within one tree. You know, you'll have hundreds of different insects which have evolved just to live in that oak tree. It's like a keystone species which makes the environment better for a whole host of other species. You know, we can't recreate that by planting loads of saplings. So we're at a point now where it seems that the conversation about climate and the ecological emergency is really ramping up.
Well, I will not stand aside and watch. I will not be silent when the world is on fire. Will you?
At the same time, it feels like actual action is reducing. So we've got, things like HS2 going on where we're ploughing through and ripping up ancient woodland.
HS2 is an absolutely terrible idea. The whole idea that it's going to somehow help people in the country through connecting them together is just lies, basically. To spend this much on a train line, which is essentially a vanity project, we don't need it. Our country's not big enough for high-speed rail, really. It takes 20 minutes off the time between London and Birmingham. It's going through 108 ancient woodlands. Just countless ancient hedgerows in fields. It's going through SSSI sites, site of scientific interest. They're trying to greenwash the whole thing. We have hardly any wildlife in this country. The reason we want to do it is to transfer wealth from the public sector to the private sector.
I think they said they cut that oak tree down to improve access into that field. But if you look, they're not even using that field. They've admitted since that they didn't actually need to cut it down, but they did anyway, so pretty disappointing. But it's massively old. That oak tree is probably 500 years old. So there's Jones Hill Camp here, which has been here for, I think it was from last February, so over a year now. And then there's another camp, Level Lane, which is also on the line because the line comes right along here.
Right.
And there's a row of 15 oak trees that are due to be felled. But there's another camp there now to try and sort of protect them.
Yeah.
And then Jones Hill, the woodland here, half of that's due to be cut down, but
there was a big thing about the bats.
They thought there was Barbastelle bats there, but because HS2 had already said they've done their ecology surveys and not found any, they refused to accept it, which is frustrating because they're ecologists. They just seem to be there to tick boxes for HS2 in every aspect of animals, like badgers, bats, birds, everything. Like it is frustrating because you know that there's loads of wildlife that's going to suffer and die. And then there's the national eviction team, who are people who've been doing the evictions, who have been like violent towards people, being punched in the face and like had to have medical attention. A couple of weeks ago, during an eviction at Paws Peace, someone in a treehouse got stamped on the head, and they were thinking they might have to airlift him to hospital because he couldn't move. I don't know that there'd be any repercussions, but there needs to be. It seems to be escalating. They seem to be realising that they can get away with hurting people and nothing's really happening. Like, the police are at places quite a lot. They were at the eviction, so yeah, the police have been completely supporting HS2. HS2 given Thames Valley Police like millions of pounds to have like a HS2 task force. There's police officers who are being paid by HS2 basically. I don't think it's happened before in this country that they've been like so openly privatised.
Just in case you've got this in video, you've been watching me phoning the police.
But they're outside of what they've been given allowance to do.
Yeah.
They don't have licenses to do any work in the wood at all.
And all these guys having to protect them.
Yeah, exactly.
So are they aware that you're calling the police? Is that what? Yeah.
Well, I think they've heard me.
Yeah. yeah.
The new police bill will not only affect environmental protest camps, but will also disproportionately threaten the rights of travellers, already one of the UK's most persecuted minority groups.
I live in a travelling community. I live with a beautiful, beautiful bunch of people. But this bill makes my way of life illegal.
I stand here today in Parliament Square in solidarity with all my Gypsy, Roma and traveller brothers and sisters.
I hate these vile creatures. The way that they've treated us travellers over centuries. My people, us Irish travellers, have been coming to this island for thousands of years. If you look back in the history of it, and they want to wipe us out. It's wrong. It's totally wrong.
We don't want to trespass, but there is nowhere for us to go. Councils are letting us down. They are not making sites and stopping places available for our culture.
It's very clear that in this country, we're living in a country that has a massive democratic deficit. It has problems. That lot over there that gather in that hall, who say that they represent us, they don't often represent us. There are no gypsies and travellers in there. There are no Roma in there. There never have been. Power rests with the people. It doesn't rest over there with that sorry lot. It rests with us. And when that is the Gypsy, Roma and traveller community and our allies, we are powerful. Think how many caravans we've got. Think how many trucks we've got. Think how many horses we've got. We've got 600,000 people. And we need to show them that we can mobilise that. We come today with dignity and peace, and we will behave ourselves. But let me give you a warning, Pretty Patel. We will not be walking into the history books. We are not going into the history books. And if you come for us, and if you come for our homes, and you come for our culture, we are coming for you.
This is not about targeting police officers for abuse or violence. A bill is a piece of legislation that is introduced into Parliament. And in this case, it is one of the most odious and racist pieces of legislation in a long line of such nonsense in recent times. Successive British governments have wept hot tears for people persecuted over there. Sometimes they've even prosecuted illegal wars through their hot tears over there, to then treat people with abuse and racism and discrimination and persecution over here. This must stop. There is one race. It is the human race. We will not be divided and conquered anymore. Part 4 of this bill is not a dog whistle. It is a foghorn.
We know politicians and successive generations have not listened to the needs of Jewish people, to black people, to the GRT community, to so many vulnerable communities. We are going to have to do this ourselves. We are going to have to be loud, we're going to have to be clear, and we're going to have to stand in solidarity. Now, policing. We know that trust in policing is low, and for good reasons. We need to go back to the principles of policing. The people are the police, and police are the people. It should be policing by consent. What we saw at that vigil was not consent. What we're seeing when people are dragged across roads or when people are silenced is not consent.
I'm fully nomadic, I run 3 businesses, and I've been watching these laws as they've been developing with absolute horror from the European perspective. The gypsies and the travellers are looked down on in Britain like no other country in Europe.
So this song is about an old man. A rambling man, I am a rambling man. Now I look behind me, my rambling days are gone. Well, I remember when I was a boy, my freedom, my lifestyle, oh, I live like a king. The road was my home, for the road I lived on. Now every road that I go, I'm told to move on.
Whose fields? Whose fields? Whose fields? And that's why we're allowed to roam, because we're Mother Earth's children, and she not put no barriers.
In Bristol, a series of protests against the new police bill ended in violent clashes between protesters and police, who used dogs, horses, pepper spray and batons to violently disperse crowds.
Who do you protect? Who do you protect?
You're going to use that on someone? Is that the plan? Why have you got it out? We're human beings, you realise that? Okay. Are you willing to use that on us?
It's part of my PPE, I'll use it if necessary, unless I'm forced.
When do you think it'll be necessary?
Okay.
Why have you got it out now? Do you think it's necessary right now?
Right now, it's slowly.
What's that?
Who are you protecting?
Who are you protecting? What are you doing? Are you not here to like serve the people?
Holy bit of Bristol or what?
Yeah. Do you not think about it, like, mate?
So, what do you think about the riots?
Well, I suppose it's easy to criticise the people who are rioting because it's not nice for people to be hurt and it's not nice for property to get damaged. It's like with any riots, isn't it? You have to look at the like wider sort of socio-economic like context of why they're happening. It's like things like this just don't happen for no reason. It's like this is like things since Black Lives Matter, especially last summer and through all of lockdown, like tension's been building, you know, like younger people, so if they've not been in college or lots of people have been let off of jobs, and then they've seen what's been happening with like Brexit, the Tory government's like complete disregard for anyone it's not mates with.
I think almost everything socially progressive has been won through struggle and sacrifice. So, you know, minimum wage, maximum work hours, the right to vote, then the right for women to vote. You know, everything was done through massive costs to the people who were fighting for these causes, and now we take them for granted. People take them for granted, and they don't know how many people were murdered or imprisoned because they were just asking to vote or asking for equal rights or whatever, you know.
In a country that is supposed to be a democracy, you hear a lot of people talking about, you know, this law will make us like Russia, like Belarus. And if I may, I'll elaborate on what that kind of means. In Russia, there is freedom to protest, just only government-sanctioned protests. So you may have seen the protests over Alexei Navalny. Of course, they were not government-sanctioned protests. But, you know, within that revenue, protests can still happen in Russia, in Belarus. This is the exact line that this government is taking. This is the precedent that it sets. Oh, we'll let you protest, but it has to be the protest within the bounds that we see fit. You know, we have to approve these protests first. And in that kind of society, you render civil society and effective grassroots democratic opposition, you know, worthless, really.
Sorts of like situations are going to become increasingly inevitable if the government does continue to crack down. The government's acting in a violent way towards its towards the people of a country, and civil unrest isn't without causes. Do you know what I mean? So maybe they should be looking at like why people are acting like this and why they feel driven to act like this, because there's reasons behind it.
The suffragettes, the liberals, were also fighting their aristocracy for the right to vote. You know. You know, the Magna Carta. The right not to be imprisoned without trial. There was a war about this. You know, lots of people died. Not just in the UK, all around the world. And still, there are some countries where they don't even have these basic rights today, and they're still fighting for them now.
After the first protest on Sunday the 21st of March, when 2 police vehicles were torched, the police claimed several officers had sustained injuries, including broken bones and a punctured lung. While these statements were actually later retracted, the police continued to use heavy-handed dispersal tactics on seated, unarmed, peaceful protesters.
Protest on Sunday and on Tuesday, following proceedings. So I'm a journalist, so I work for Bristol 24/7. On Tuesday evening, it seemed to me that that protest was fundamentally peaceful, and then the police warned them that they weren't meant to be there, and then came in quite heavy-handed.
Crowd, disperse, otherwise dogs may be used!
Otherwise dogs may be used.
Disperse or dog tactics may be used! This is a warning!
Are we being violent?
Disperse
Are we
dogs
being
may be
violent?
used against you!
You are threatening
Disperse or
violence.
dogs may be used against you! Disperse
You are
or dogs may be
threatening
used against
violence.
you! This is a final warning! Disperse or dogs may be used against you! Be warned. The next thing that happens is the dogs come through and bite you. I'm asking you nicely to leave.
The next thing, the dogs come through and bite me.
Very possibly.
Okay. And for what reason?
For not dispersing when you've been asked very nicely to do so.
Okay, and that is a reason for an animal to attack a human.
I would advise you that force may be used against you. That's the end of the conversation.
For a peaceful protest, somebody coming near you, a dog is going to bite me.
Possibly.
Possibly, okay. Understood.
Police dogs, police horses. It was certainly a well-planned operation. They were just sitting down. I was just watching the last vestiges of protesters being cleared away. I thought, this is over, I'll walk home. I only live about 100 metres away. Turned around, and the next thing I know, I got jumped on by 2 police officers who grabbed me around both arms and frog marched me over. I said to them, look guys, I'm a journalist, I'm media, I'm reporting. But they said, we don't believe you, we don't believe you. We saw you chanting. And I was like, I'm really sorry, I think you're mistaken, I'm a journalist. They spoke to me for a bit. No, they said, you don't need to be here. I said, I'm afraid I do need to be here because I need to document this. If I'm not here, no one will be able to see what happens here. And they eventually, probably after a good 5 minutes, let me on my way. This is reminding me of what happened on Tuesday night. Actually, there was was a few dozen people just sat in the road in front of police lines. It's eerily similar, actually.
We've used multiple warnings to say disperse.
I have been hit 3 times by police officers.
You are attacking us! You're not doing anything! Is anyone here fighting you? You are attacking us! We are having a peaceful protest for what we've...
And they told me that it's because of the protest.
You've had that protest, haven't you? All day you've been protesting.
I am here to fight for my right to have an opinion.
When I was walking away, I had my hands above my head. And obviously the dogs were faster than I was walking and they come bit me in the arse. Just now, about 30 minutes ago, yes sir.
And so what was happening with the police?
I was walking away from the police as they were approaching us. I had my back to them and my hands above my head. And they had their dogs on their leashes. And I felt it hit me. And I stayed with my hands above my head. I kept walking. I might have picked up the pace a little bit when it bit me. But yeah.
And so basically you weren't moving?
I was walking, yes. Yes. I was walking away from them. Yeah, I was walking away from them. And obviously, look, it ain't gonna bit me in the front, did it? It bit me in the back.
They attacked us, man. We stood there and they attacked us. And they said, they said move back, or like, we said why? Because we told you to. It's crazy, and like the reason people are fighting back with violence is because they communicate with us in violence. That's the only language that they will listen to.
The people here with weapons and shields and stuff is you lot. We're all just here.
They are hitting people with batons, and that's not okay. I'm arguing with police officers that are supposed to be here to protect her.
You bruised me. Have you got anything to say about that? Anything?
Get back from the line. We live in a democracy, not a dictatorship.
There are 9 people in jail now because they committed non-violent civil disobedience repeatedly in the street.
So, I know you spent 12 years in prison.
Yeah.
But you seem to have come out of it quite well.
Yeah.
Like, you seem like you're really strong and empowered.
Yeah.
What would you say to people that are facing possibly, potentially, up to 12 years in prison for riot? How did you keep your strength that time? Because it sounds like it was really, really, really difficult for you. And I'm not trying to downplay that.
For me personally, it wasn't it wasn't so difficult because I just kept remembering what got me there, and which was the fact that I don't agree that people should be murdered because of the color of their skin. And of course, the answer is no, they shouldn't. And so therefore, I did the right thing, and the consequences of that are whatever they have to be will be, and I just got to get through to the other end of it, whatever it will be. But historically, I will be judged to be in the right, whether it's stamped by a Bulgarian judge or not. So I guess for other people who are facing similar situations, the question is always, when you're going over your mind, like, how the hell did I get here, is always to go back to that fundamental question: is it right what was happening that I was opposing, or is it wrong and I was opposing it correctly? And I guess if you say, well, it actually was it was actually right and I was wrong, well, then you're not going to have a really nice time in prison. It's going to be a really slow, grueling punishment and torture. But if you can reflect on how you got to prison and still come out with the answer that yes, the moral question of right and wrong, I'm on the side of the right, then you can work out the details after, you know. But then the question would be then, do we have the right to protest or not? Should police attack people who are protesting? And then saying, well, yeah, people have the right to protest. No, police shouldn't attack, and then that's it. Because it's not about the person.
Yeah.
It's not about the specific incident.
Yeah.
It's about the principle in the greater, broader social context and historic evolution of our rights as people, as a society, and as individuals. The question is then, do we want to keep that as part of the society, or do we not want to keep that? You know, are we going to fight for that to stay there? If the answer is yes, we want that to be a characteristic of our society, then after that, it's not so important. It's a broader issue. It's more important than the individual.
Yeah.
And I guess the people who are in prison now, or who will be going to prison, they have to remember that they're not there. You know, they weren't protesting for themselves, because they could have been in bed drinking. You know, they could have been in front of the TV drinking beer that day. They went there for the greater good. They went there for a social reason, for all of our rights to protest and free assembly and free movement, and to remember that whilst they're in prison, don't focus so much on the self, and think more of it from a broader perspective in terms of society and also in terms of history. That one day, no matter what happens, one day history will look back and say, those guys, we have these rights to freely assemble and to protest and to free movement because of that. So I mean, like, a lot of people are making parallels to the poll tax. The first guy who went to prison for not paying the poll tax. If he wasn't the first, he definitely was one of the first.
Yeah.
So, you know, there were lots of people who suffered a lot to fight that, and they have been. I think society now judges them to have been correct, and to have actually, you know, long story short, you know, to be heroes.
Yeah.
That they, through their sacrifice and fighting.
Yeah.
We got to a better place now than we were then.
Yeah.
Our silence won't protect us. Throughout history, our predecessors have fought and fought for us to be here, to be voting, to be equal in law, although we know that's not always true, which this bill shows. We've got to continue the work of our predecessors, of our ancestors, in continuing to fight for social justice, continuing to fight for the right to protest and to assemble. We can't give up now. We can't give up, because I know, like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted of fighting. I mean, I'm only 21 and I'm tired of fighting against, like, the Tories and against this descent into fascism. Our silence will not protect us, and we must continue to be fighting and to talk about it and to make people uncomfortable by talking about it.
Today the Tories have made a massive mistake. What they've done is united us against a common enemy. We can see all the people that the bill affects, all the protesters, the travellers, the various communities. It's showing us that we can unite against them.
It's clear to me that this bill and all the other shit they're throwing at us at the moment is representative of a dying government who know they've failed everybody apart from themselves and their corporate mates. If you're not mad with anger, you're not paying attention. And if you're mad with anger and you're not doing something about it, you're in a bad way.
With the bill still rumbling through Parliament, but unlikely to pass into law until next year, the future of our right to roam freely, protest the wrongs of society, protect our natural world is still under threat. If we want to protect the remaining freedoms we have, the next generation must learn the importance of what we're losing in terms of rights, space, quality of environment.